Madam Chairman, good morning. Brandon Combs with the Calguns Foundation. This measure is nothing more than constitutional chicken. Much as the First Amendment protects modern forms of communication, so too does the Second Amendment protect semi-automatic centerfire rifles. If the Second Amendment does not protect the weapons that are the target of this measure, what does it protect? While we strongly oppose this bill on its merits, we look forward to the opportunity to litigate this matter up to the United States Supreme Court and end the debate once and for all. Thank you.
Craig DeLuz with the California Association of Federal Firearms Licensees. It's already been stated here that it's very clear that the weapons that are being banned by this bill are not the ones that are being used in violent crimes. In fact, it was said that rifles as a whole are less than 3%. These weapons actually make up a much smaller percentage of those firearms. My big concern here is this, and it goes back to when you look at the history of gun bans and gun control in the state of California, and it's a recognition that it's about not as much about protecting people, but it is a dislike of those people having a firearm. In the 1850s, it was Native Americans having a firearm. In the 1960s, it was the Black Panthers having a firearm. And today, you and I, every single one of us are those people. We are concerned about those people having a firearm that, oh, by the way, is not used in violent crimes. You know, the Second Amendment is one of the most vital protections that we have in this country. You know, just as we would not respect, we would not abridge someone's right to freedom of speech, we would not impose unreasonable restrictions on that. This body would not impose unreasonable restrictions on a woman's right to choose. To impose unreasonable restrictions on the right to keep and bear arms is specifically unconstitutional. And I want to make it very clear that while you recognize, and I believe even the author in this body recognizes that, you know, you cannot make gun owners sit in the back of the bus, what you've done with this measure is effectively remove all of the seats from the front of the bus. It is important that we protect. Rights are dangerous. Someone once told me that rights are dangerous, and that we ought to only remove those rights or restrict those rights in very extreme circumstances. To ban a weapon that is not used in crimes, that is not used in violent crimes, is not an extreme circumstance. I strongly urge you to vote no on this measure. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, Sam Paredes representing Gun Owners of California. Many very eloquent points have been made. I'd like to make just a couple for your consideration. I'm sorry that there aren't more members here to listen, but hopefully they're listening electronically. Number one, there is no secret that more law-abiding citizens use firearms to successfully defend themselves every day in America than those who use them for criminal activities or in an unadvised manner. By millions. There are 3 million people, according to all of the reputable research organizations that are used by the government, the National Institute of Justice, the National Science Foundation, and even the Center for Disease Control, admit that there are millions. They differ between 2.5 and 3 million people that successfully use firearms to defend themselves every year throughout America. Even Attorney General Janet Reno, under President Bill Clinton's administration, fudged the numbers and said, well, there are at least 1.5 million people who use guns of all types to successfully defend themselves in America. That number translates to 300 times a day in California. Law-abiding citizens use guns to successfully defend themselves. Anything you do, like a gun ban like this, that will take away the ability for law-abiding citizens to select the firearms that they deem are most appropriate for their own defense, will by definition take them out of the category of successful defenders and put them into the category of victims. You cannot escape that. These gun control measures will have the exact opposite effect, and we will instead have a much longer line of people here lamenting the loss of loved ones because the gun control measures allowed them to happen. My final point, it's been mentioned on several occasions about this, the Heller versus Washington, D.C. decision, and it's been briefly discussed. Let me give you the words from Justice Scalia. He said that you cannot ban an entire class of firearms that are in popular use in America. That is unconstitutional. What do you think this is? This bill will ban the single largest class of firearms, most popular class for all purposes in America and here in California, for fun, for hunting, and for self-protection. This bill will create more victims, and we ask you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Ed Worley with the National Rifle Association. This legislation takes me back to 1989 and 1990 before I got involved in politics. I'm a native Californian. The reason I work for the NRA is because the original so-called gun bans that took place back then. Just as this bill here today will not do anything. Over the years of working with the NRA for over 21 years now, what I've seen the effects of the gun ban is the following. You're going to sweep in people who don't know what the law is, who don't understand the intricacies of the law, and they will be swept in the criminal justice system, and they will be crushed by the machine of the law system. Not because they've committed a crime, because they don't know the technicalities of the law. But here, this legislation is probably the worst bill I've ever seen, frankly. I've had a discussion with Senator Steinberg about the bill. I've talked with his staff about the bill. I asked him, I said, do you realize that you're sweeping in all semi-automatic rifles, all, including 22 target rifles, Olympic target rifles? And the response I've gotten is, well, we don't know how to write it because it's so complicated. And that's true. It is very complicated. It's a very technical issue in some ways. But here, understand, in California, when you designate a firearm, a so-called assault weapon, you create a special class of that the person has to deal with it. If this bill passes, I will not be able to go to the national forest with my daughter or anyone else to shoot my Ruger 1022 rifle. Why? Because in California, you cannot take a so-called assault weapon onto national forest land or BLM land to go target shooting. Many of the rifles that are in this list, because they've been swept up by this list, are rifles that if I showed you a picture of them in this committee, you would not say in any way, shape, matter, or form they're military-style firearms, because they're not. They're traditional firearms. Many of those cannot be fed but any other way through a detachable magazine. You can't feed them from the top. You can't do anything with them. So what we've come to now in 20 years of this gun control debate, and through 20 years of off and on people here at the legislature trying to understand firearms technology, is we've come to the logical conclusion that I told people, and we in the NRA have told people, that the logical conclusion is going to be. We are now here at a gun ban that bans all semi-automatic rifles. That is where we told everybody this was going 20 years ago. That's where we told everybody this was going 10 years ago. Now what you're going to have is you're going to have tens of thousands of people, if not millions of people in the state, who are going to be swept into the law enforcement system as criminals, not because they've committed a crime, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they have firearms they don't know they need to register as assault weapons. You're going to have rifles that cost $5,000, $6,000 that have gold inlay in them, that if I showed them to you, you would think that these are museum pieces. They will be considered assault weapons. You have World War I rifles that are collector's pieces. They're going to be swept into this, and they're going to be banned. So it's easy to sit here and talk about all these different things, but when you read the technicalities of the bill and you read what's going on, and when you deal day to day with people, like the 76-year-old school teacher that I had to talk to on the phone, when he tried to do the right thing, he found out that the rifle he had was a so-called assault weapon. He tried to go down and register the gun. He thought he could. He was going to be a good citizen. He then admitted to a crime, and he had his rifle taken from him. And he called me on the phone, and he said, I can't believe this. He says, I'm a 76-year-old school teacher. I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to register a rifle. I was trying to comply with the rifle. And I was trying to do what I was supposed to do. But he is now a criminal. He had to plead out to a crime of something he possessed. Not because he done anything wrong, but because he doesn't understand the technicalities of the law. This is the most sweeping, comprehensive gun ban that I've ever seen in the United States. And if you think this is going to stand up to the scrutiny of the United States Supreme Court, you are sadly mistaken. Because this, what you have done with this legislation, what you've done with the political rhetoric that's gone on here in this building, is you are driving gun sales through the roof. What happened last year is there were 1.3 million guns sold in California. If you go to a gun store right now and you try to buy any semi-automatic rifle, no matter what it is, you can't find them. The ironic thing about this is the very people who sit in this room and preach to us that we need to ban these things are the very people who are driving the industry and driving the market to where you can't even find them anywhere to buy them. Many people didn't want to buy these until you try to ban them. So this is sort of a counterintuitive argument here. As every time you try to ban these, what happens is the sales skyrocket. So, as a native Californian, as a person who's been involved in this for quite a while, I can tell you what is going to happen. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people are going to be swept into the criminal justice system because they've not committed a crime, but because they didn't know how to comply with the law. And you're going to crowd the jails, and you're going to crowd law enforcement, you're going to crowd the courts with people whose only crime is they didn't know what you were doing here, and the only crime was they didn't know how to comply with the law. And for all the things we talk about here, and all of us who are here all the time talk about ROCA and not overfilling the courts and everything else, that's exactly what this is going to do. So I appreciate the passion. As a father of a school-age kid, I appreciate that. Everybody's heart was broken when these things happen. But to punish people, tens of thousands of people, whose only crime is they want to own a firearm and protect their family, I think is not serving the diligence of the legislature. I don't think it's serving the people in the state of California. And for one, as a native Californian, I am highly offended by this type of legislation that seeks to make me and all my fellow firearm shooters and all our fellow competitors into criminals only because we choose not to fill out more and more and more paperwork and burden more and more people. And one last thing. The State Sheriff's Association, when they met to discuss the Senator Feinstein's gun ban, they voted not to support the Senator Feinstein gun ban. And if I'm not mistaken, Sheriff D'Agostini, didn't the State Sheriff's Association vote not to support this legislation also?
We're not. He already told us that.
Well, anyway, thank you very much, Madam Chair.